Torah, Mishpatim, page 148. Second half of the page. Okay, the pasuk says in this week's parsha, "Ve'ele Mishpatim asher tosim lefnehem." These are the laws that you should place before them. Ki sikna eved ivri. When you buy an eved ivri, he works for 6 years, he goes out in the 7th, and so on. The tzarich lav, we need to understand the lefnehem mashma lashon rabbin. Before them. It doesn't say before him. It says before them, plural. And then it says, v'chi sikna, it should have said, v'chi siknu. If it's plural, then it should either say, lefnehem and ki siknu, or if it says ki sikna, it should say, el mishpatim asher tasim lefanecha. It starts off plural and ends off singular. So he says, the inyan is, ki sikna koya meisher rabbeinu olav shalom. When it says ki sikna, he's not talking to the Jews. These are the laws you should give the Jews in general. Then he speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu individually and says ki sikna koya Moshe Rabbeinu. And it says koya it goes on what the pasuk just said. That these are the laws that you Moshe Rabbeinu should give them. Moshe Rabbeinu dafka. Yosef and Mishpatim lefnehem. How is that? Aidei kisikna eved ivri. Through this, that you buy an eved ivri. In other words, like this, the pasuk is speaking really to Moshe Rabbeinu. The pasuk says, "Ele Mishpatim." These are the laws that you tasim, you should give to the Jews. And then the pasuk continues. How do you give them to the Jews? By you buying an eved ivri. What does that mean? In the book of Dvarim, we say this in Shema. The Chumash Dvarim, Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking, right? The whole book of Dvarim is not, we don't find Hashem is speaking to Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Jews. And then the pasuk says, in the middle of Shema we say, that Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, I will give grass in the fields for your animals to eat. In Shema, the whole Dvar Moshe Rabbeinu speaking. So and then in Shema, what's in the Chumash, in Parshas Eikev, when it says, I am giving grass in the field, it doesn't say Hashem said I'm giving grass. Moshe Rabbeinu says I'm giving grass. Shemashpia b'chinas esav levahem techa, which means he's giving grass. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that's sustaining grass for the animals. The commentators asked the question, the Mefarshim Chumash, what do you mean that Moshe Rabbeinu says, I am giving grass? He's not giving grass, Hashem's giving grass. So they say the Shekhinah spoke through the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. It was like the microphone, you hear from the speakers, I am giving grass. It's not the speakers are giving grass, the speaker is giving grass. So Moshe Rabbeinu was like Hashem's microphone. So when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke, he says, I am giving grass. He's just repeating what Hashem said. I mean, Hashem is speaking through him. So he says, what does it mean? Well, the Inyan is as follows. It says in the pasuk, it says in the pasuk, Hashem says, I will plant the Yidden, I will plant the Jews, Zera Adam and Zera Behemoth. Seed of man and seed of animals. Which means that Hashem is planting in Jews 2 different types of neshamas. Some neshamas are called Zera Adam, the seed of man, and certain neshamas are called Zera Behemoth, animals. What does that mean? There's 2 levels by neshamas. Aleph, a neshamas a gevaya ma'ed. One is very lofty levels of neshamas. V'heima nikra zera adam. They are called zera adam. Why? Sheinam nimshach neshama shenimshu from adam el yishal akise. Like it says, Nasa adam b'tzalmeinu kibinuseinu, which are the neshamas of Atzilus. In other words, like this: the difference between animals and people is, as we say, the first bracha after the initial 3, we say, Atochen Ladon Das. Why do we start off with that bracha, Atochen Ladon Das, you grant das to people? Because the difference between an animal and a person, the Gemara says, Adam yesh bei das, behema ein lo das. A person has das, an animal doesn't have das. Now das doesn't mean intellect. Das means connection. Like Dr. Rabbi says in Parag Gimel of Tanya, what does das mean? There's Chochmah and Bina. That's the understanding of it. Das is the Chassidus for his Chabros, binding yourself to the subject matter, meaning internalizing it that you feel it. Das is actually feeling. No, that's Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah and Bina means it's the spark and then you broaden it in Bina. Das is actually becoming one with the subject matter that you're learning.
Does it imply action?
No. Das is the actual creator of Midas. And the Alter Rebbe calls the pasuk Adam Yodas Chava. It says Adam was intimate with Chava, so the pasuk doesn't. What does the pasuk say? Adam Yodas Chava. Das. Why? Because intimacy is the level of das. You become one. You become one, that person. So therefore, there are neshamas that are called Zera Adam because those neshamas down here are neshamas. All neshamas originate in Atzilus. So like we learn, on the trip down, you get stuck in Bria, Yitzira. See, there's certain neshamas Atzilus go through the freeway. They don't stop. No traffic. They don't go through they go on the freeway, no traffic. They come the way they are in Atzilus, that's the way they come down here. So those neshamas down here are in a level of Atzilus. What is the uniqueness of Atzilus? It's a world which is completely bottled to Hashem. In Atzilus, there's das. So there's certain neshamas, few neshamas, by the way it says, that are at the level of Zera Adam, which are, and he says, Mashenk and neshamas debriya yitzira are called avodim, and that's what he says, in kavadim, in kavodim. I know, what does it mean? What does it mean that those neshamas called Zera Adam? Kamei shemaylas Adam shiyash li das. Just like the uniqueness of a person is that he has das, kachel on neshamas yesh lam das godlu belokus. They have a tremendous bittul and feeling of elokus. And he said, one second, Pirish das ein ratzuleimer hayidiyah levad. Das doesn't mean just knowing. El bechinas hargosha mamish, feeling. There's a difference between knowing something is wrong or feeling something is wrong. You can know something's wrong and do it anyway. Because obviously you didn't feel it. If you feel it, you wouldn't do it. What?
In Hasidus, there is nothing but Hashem.
Right. It's all bittul. So those in the neshamas, why are they bottled? Because they feel. If you feel it, you're bottled to it. So those in the neshamas are neshamas which are completely bottled to Hashem.
What is the difference between Hasidus and the crown of Hashem?
Crown, a Kesser is even higher than Atzilus.
I know, but what's the difference?
It's a higher level of Kedusha. And the source of Atzilus is the level of Kesser. But let's not get into that now. He says, okay, Vabeis, and then there's a second type of neshamas. They're called Zera Behema. The neshamas that are called the seed of animals. Hainu neshamas, the biyah of Bria Tzir and Asiyah. Shem Kamad Kol and neshamas Shebedirisenu, which is in practice. Almost, he says, almost all generations of our days is now Rebbe's time yet. And the neshamas of biyah, ki neshamas that Atzilus same b'nei aliyah shem mu'atim. Because the neshamas of Atzilus are very lofty levels, which are very few. Afilu b'deiros rishenim. Even in the earlier generations, there were very few neshamas of Atzilus, of Zera Adam. So those, what are the neshamas though of Zera Behema? Shein neshamas she'ein lam das kol kach belukus. They don't have so much of a feeling, not an understanding, a feeling of elukus. And he says, it doesn't mean they have no understanding of elukus. He says, even though they have a tremendous understanding of it. They understand the greatness of Hashem. From books and scribes and so on. They have a tremendously great understanding of elukus. The way Hashem gives life and creates everything. His greatness has no end to it. But they have a great understanding of Elokus. They don't feel it.
I don't know if there's an answer for this, but what makes those neshamas have the zechut to have such a thing as the other neshamas that they cannot?
Hashem chose those neshamas for whatever reason. At the end of the fourth parak of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says many times, neshamas gavayas b'yeser. No, I'm saying it in the parabase. How great lofty neshamas come down to be the children of very simple people. That's Hashem. That Hashem chooses. That's not our choice, and therefore it's not our responsibility to be Moshe Rabbeinu. I'll give you an example. Rabbi Kiva's father, Rabbi Kiva ben Yosef, right? Yosef was a ger tzedek. He wasn't a great man, but Rabbi Kiva's neshama was super great.
Obviously, had the zechut to be that way.
Doesn't the kli have to
That's
be
Hashem, yeah. But that's Hashem's business. Hashem says, I plant those neshamas that understand the Elokus, those neshamas that don't have a feeling of it. Not understand, feeling of it. And okay.
Sense.
That comes from Hashem. The function, as he's going to explain, the function of Moshe Rabbeinu is to bring das into those neshamas that by nature don't. You know, das is there, but it's not the felt, revealed level. So the role of Moshe Rabbeinu is to instill das, emuna, raya mehemna, kismaima, kivata tetzava. Yeah, but there's also to instill das in those animals, animal neshamas.
In other words, there is help for those neshamas, Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yes. And he says, therefore those neshamas, because they don't feel Elokus, they're not automatically bottled to Elokus. They are called behema. Shebehema yeshul riyah shmiya. A behema sees and hears. Yeah, which spiritually means seeing, understanding, hearing, understanding. They have an understanding. Das. They don't have the hargosha, the feeling of it. In other words, they don't have the ability to make free choice. In order to make free choice, you have to have the maturity to understand the difference between, not understand, to feel the difference between right and wrong, and that comes with age, sometimes, even by a person. You can have a brilliant 11-year-old kid and a foolish, stupid 14-year-old kid. Yeah, and the 11-year-old kid is much smarter than the 14-year-old kid. This kid's obligated in mitzvahs because he's bar mitzvah, and this kid isn't. He has a greater understanding of good and bad. Yes, but there's a level of das. At the bar mitzvah, you become a bar das. You become somebody who has the maturity to be able to understand and figure out the difference between good and bad. I can know what good and bad is, but you don't have the maturity to feel that this is right and this is wrong. Therefore, they're not obligated in mitzvahs.
How can you reconcile? I'm trying to reconcile my understanding of that based on modern Hebrew, which is knowledge.
Modern Hebrew is not, we're talking in Lashon Kodesh. There's Chochmah and Bina and Das.
But there should be some, there's no relationship at all.
Yeah.
Das in Hebrew.
Das is binding yourself to the Chochmah and Bina. I'll give you a simple example. You can have a brilliant doctor. Yeah. And he knows exactly what's healthy and what's not healthy. Right? And he's a doctor. He'll do unhealthy things. Yeah? He knows it's wrong. Well, what's lacking there? What's lacking there is das. Chachma and Bina, understanding that it's not healthy, he understands very well. But he doesn't feel it, and therefore you don't do it. Like Aristotle, the preacher of morals, when he was caught doing an immoral act, he said, now I'm not Aristotle. Which means I can preach morals, I can have a great understanding of morals, but that doesn't mean I feel it to do what's right and what's wrong. I can still do wrong.
That's understanding is that.
No, Bina is understanding.
Bina means vision.
No. If anything, Chacham is vision. Chacham is Riyah, Bina, Shmiya, Das is discussion. Okay. Let's go. Okay, what is Adah? What is Das? By the way, let me explain to you something. There's a lot of, you can't ask a question on Torah from modern Hebrew. Okay? Because, I'll give you a simple example. How do you say electricity in Hebrew, in Ivrit? Chashmal. You know what Chashmal is? It's a revelation of godliness on the godly throne. Kena Chashmal. Chashmal refers to a super great revelation of God. Okay, so you're going to tell me Chashmal. In fact, many religious people, Tzaddikim, when they came out with modern Hebrew, with Chashmal, they were very opposed to it. You're taking a word of Hashem's Merkava, which represents a tremendously great level of Elukos, and using it for electricity, because electricity makes lights go on. I mean, there's a lot of, huh?
Insensitive insult.
Right, but I'm saying something else. So you can't ask modern Hebrew, you can have a word, but in Torah it means completely different.
But this is Chashmal. They had to invent a name for it.
So invent a name.
But not that they are. They are was always.
Half of Hebrew anyway is English.
They are now,
Modern Hebrew, half of it's English.
Now they are somehow adopted.
Okay, let's go back. So he says, Shadas b'china shargosha. Das is the level of feeling. Chaskol and nikshedes and nikvaz benafshe. When the understanding is bound and it's ingrained within him. Kilu margish, as if he feels it. Ki das o meloshin v'adam yauda. It's a person. Das is, you can have a lot of times also. A great person can explain to you what pain is all about. Yeah? But if you don't feel the pain, you don't feel it. You can understand it, but you can't feel it. Okay. Sure, but by the way, why do mothers, this is a natural biological fact, mothers feel the pain of the kids more than the father does? It's not only because he's lazy, let her do it. The mother has intuition. She feels the child more than because she gave birth to it. She feels the child more than the father does. It's only natural. She gave birth to it. It's hers. She feels it.
Father goes by regesh, and mother goes by.
Father goes by laziness.
But no, by their opinion, and mother goes with regesh.
Okay, true. Women are more emotional than that because they come from that level. Okay, Shubuchinis is kash, is chaburs. Like the lotion of the pasuk Adam Yoda, which is iskash, is chaburs, connection and binding. By that of Zenemer Psari Ech Ze Elokah, it says in the pasuk, from my own flesh I will see. Ech Ze means see Hashem. Ki'ilu Reya. Seeing is believing. When you see something, you feel it much more than if you just hear it. The question is like this. We say, from my own flesh, I can feel godliness. Godliness is not something you could feel. What does the pasuk say? He says, how can you say that? From my own flesh, I see. It's like a person knows. We all know that we have a soul in us. We can't see the soul, the neshama within us. What the soul really is. He feels it. Because you're alive, you're functioning. So we feel, I don't need proof that I have a neshama. Nobody has to prove to me that I have a neshama, even though I don't know what it is. I never saw it. Why don't they need proof of what my neshama is? Because I feel it. It functions. It keeps me alive. And therefore, when you're sleeping, the chayis leaves you. It's the 60th of death. Then when you wake up, the gili and the chayis of the nefesh come back. The same thing, das and elukus. That the neshama of Atzilus have, like Eve said, Mipsari Echse, those neshamas actually feel godliness. They don't only understand that the world functions, there must be a God. They actually feel elukus, and that's, by the way, when you feel something, you bottle to it. If you don't feel, why should it be bottled? Even though no mind can possibly grasp Hashem, we can't understand the essence of Hashem. But the existence, Chassidus explains like this. Everything has the Metzius and the Mahus. The existence and the essence of it. For instance, everybody knows, you don't have to prove to, like we said, you don't have to prove to me that I have a neshama. I know the Metzius of the neshama, I know the existence of the neshama because it's functioning in me. The essence of the neshama, that we don't know. Same thing in Elukus. You can understand the Metzius of Elukus. You can understand there's a world out there that didn't make itself. There's a world functioning. So we can know there's a Hashem, there's a God. But what that Hashem is, that we don't know. But we can see with certainty that I have a neshama. We could see with certainty there is a God, but that's on the Metzius of Elokus. So he says, when the pasuk said, "Mipsari echse lekaf," from my own flesh, I can see godliness. The Rebbe said, "How can you see God? There's nothing to see." It means you see you know for sure, it's certain by you, the existence of Hashem.
Some people are not so certain that there is a neshama. They say that the brain works behind the heart beats.
Okay, what's the difference between a living person and a dead person?
The brain works, heart beats, and the body works.
Yeah, well now what makes that work, that all of a sudden you die, it stops working?
The brain stops, the heart stops, and that's...
What made the brain work and what made it stop? What makes the heart pump and now stop? You can call it whatever you want. We call it neshama, but there got to be some difference of life and death. If a person is functioning, they're alive, and they don't function, they're dead. There has to be something causing the difference. I'm asking you a question.
Yes.
There has to be something causing it to exist. We'll call it neshama. You want to call it Super Bowl? Call it Super Bowl.
No, it's the brain and the heart.
What makes the brain function? One minute. Does a dead person have a brain?
Yes.
What's the difference between living person, dead person? The brain works, doesn't work. The heart works. What makes that heart and brain work?
You could say the energy of the blood.
That energy is called that neshama, no? There's something keeping it alive.
There is no question for me, but
How can anybody say, don't call it a soul? But there has to be something that makes a difference between what changed in the person between living and dead. Yeah, the heart is working, now it's not. Yeah, but why is it now not working? The battery went out.
I think for an agnostic, it's very easy to explain that part.
Why?
Without an neshama. It's a physical,
what is the difference between a person?
And the oxygen.
What makes that work? What makes it tick?
You just put emotion like that.
Who? What? I don't know. So but there's something doing it.
Some
So that entity is called soul. What's the difference? You want to call entity? Call entity. You want to call Super Bowl? Call Super Bowl.
You want to call it Super Bowl?
What's it?
For an agnostic, that's not very challenging at all. To not call it a soul.
Don't call it soul. Call it energy.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so what we call soul, you call energy. It's the same thing. What I say in English, you say in Farsi. It's the same thing.
Fine. Okay.
So what?
Nothing.
But there's still something keeping it alive.
The flow of blood.
Now, are we aware of that? We're going to call it energy. Are we aware of that energy? Do we know what the energy is? But do we know what the essence of the energy is? No.
So long as the person is alive, it's very easy to explain.
That it exists,
Yeah.
not what it is.
Yeah.
So we're saying the same thing. Just I'm using the word neshama, using the word energy.
That's fine, yeah.
So it's the same concept of a soul. We call it neshama. In English, it's called soul. In atheists, they call it energy. No, what's the difference?
There is something.
There has to be something. I mean, even an idiot would understand that. Okay, so he says, Agam the less machshava defisi. How can you see godliness? Echse elokah. He said, Muhu seina musik. The essence of Hashem is not understood. Ava mitzius and neidav nirgish. But the existence of the energy. Ma'ashanureim shaylim is same great guf God. The world is like one big body. Then chayamim v'kayamim, and they're existing. Harechai is bohem. This life that makes the universe function is me'ein tzav baruch ha'shefeh ben b'chol rega, that constantly keeps it in existence. V'askal zu u'meseges hakol. That everybody can understand, right? But to be bound to it, in other words, like this, very simple. If I realize that my existence is completely dependent on Hashem, yes? So if I only understand it, but I don't have to live like that, so I can go do things against Hashem. Simple, right? But if I mamish feel, that my whole existence is Hashem, how in the world can I go against Hashem? You can't. The only reason you could, because you don't feel it. You don't have das. Those are zera behemoths. Neshamas that don't have that. They have chokhmah and bina, and they have great, it's a great neshama, chelak alakam out. But those neshamas coming down don't have the das. That's the zera behemoth. Kshim is kasher b'nefesh, but to be bound to the nefesh. She'anik.
That's Yetzirah.
It's the function of the Yetzirah, yeah. She'anik she'v'nirgish mimenu mamish. Ki lo reya zeh b'chinas das. Zeh nikra b'chinas das. What is das? Like we said, when you actually feel it. It's not enough to know it. You feel it.
There are not too many neshamas.
He says these neshamas that are them are very few. Even in the earlier generations, there were few. Well, yeah, tanoim and amiroim, there were very few, relatively speaking, more than now. But Balzeh Amru, look in top of Ayin. Balzeh Amru, this is what Chazal say. Ezel Chacham Areyas and Neilet. Who is a Chacham? One that sees the future. What do you mean? Ki lo reya ba'ayin mamish. What does it mean on that? So Chassidus explains like this. Ezel Chacham Areyas and Neilet. Simply, it means who is a wise person sees the outcome of it. In other words, if you want to eat a certain food and you love the food but it makes you sick, so fool will think about the now and will eat it. A Chacham will see the future, it doesn't pay. But Chassidus interprets it to mean Ezel Chacham Areyas and Neilet. He sees the Neilad, how everything is being created, how everything in the world is being born, how everything is being existing. That's the level of Das. Suraya, he sees it. Every second.